Hi, my name is Kim. I'm a licensed and nationally certified Chinese medical provider and a Taoist practitioner. And today I get to talk to you about part 4 of the weird health symptoms that have been cropping up over the last few months. Hey, if you've been trying to detox that spike protein out of your body and you're having a little bit of a difficulty with that, well, I've got a training. Click on the training in the upper right-hand corner of this video, or it will be in the video description below, or the link will also be at the end of the video. That's going to take you to my personal training. It will go over the supplements that I'm using in clinic, the brand names, the quantities that I'm using, and the order in which I found people can use them. Okay, I hope that helps. I want to take a couple minutes to recognize and thank some of the other professionals that have been out there that have been sharing information that they have found or have been working hard to get information released and into the hands of the public. Because without them, I wouldn't have even thought about looking in this direction. So I want to thank Dr. John Campbell, and you can find him on YouTube. He was the first one who introduced me to the Pfizer documents. He was also the person who introduced me to the spike in average death rates, and that happened in February. And then there was Dr. Bean, and Dr. Bean, you can find him on YouTube also. Great at explaining the concepts, the medical concepts of how things work in the body. And so that was really good at helping me flush out huge pieces of information that I didn't have. There was a Dr. Malone. Dr. Malone's been hit for being conspiracy theorists, and I wanted to understand what it was that he was saying. And, that's one of the things that's really hard with smart people. They talk to you like you're on their level, and, I'm not anywhere near your level. So they'll say these things, and I'm like, what does that mean? I have no idea, because the level of context that you need to understand what they're saying is just tremendous. But he said a few things, and that got me thinking, that got me researching. And so I want to thank him for, sharing his opinion. He has been, harassed horribly by the establishment for his statements. And so for me, when someone's harassed horribly by the establishment, that just encourages me to go research. And then there's a doctor in Germany, and I forget what his name is. Dr. Arndt Burkholt. Really interesting, the research that he's done. There's a group of professionals that have requested, that went through a lot of work to get the Pfizer documents. So there's just a ton of people out there that, without them continually picking away at the information out there, without them continually saying, hey, I need my voice to be heard. I want to be part of this conversation, and I'm trying to find an effective way to communicate here, but I'm not given a lot of options. Without them continuing their push, I don't know if any of this information would have come out. Definitely those Pfizer documents would have never been released. So, and then I want to thank President Biden, because without his executive order to release all classified documentation on the origins of COVID that he signed last month in March, without that release, the things like the Muddy Waters report, we would have never seen it. And that was one of the most well-written, clear reports that I was able to read through. And what I liked about that report is, they had this huge committee that spent 18 months putting together all the information that was out there. and it was from doctors to executives. It was a huge variety of people, and they understood that they were going to be talking to people like you and me. So, our senators, and they went through lengths to help us understand why things were what they were and where the problems were and what was going on. So that report is an amazing report, 300 pages. Yeah, I read the whole thing. It took me 2 days, but I read the whole thing. And then the Pfizer documents, I've been plowing through those because, I was curious, what tests did they do and what did those tests show? In this episode, we're going to look at the 5 ways that this spike protein can harm your body. I'll do a separate episode. You're going to be able to take your new information on what the spike protein is and look at some of the science that's happening out there and be able to put it together for yourself. So that's what this stream is going to cover. And then it's up to you to make a decision because this is your health. And I truly believe that every one of us should have a say in our health. Maybe we don't always know what's best. And there's also the concept of democracy. Democracy, it really does take a lot of time. Some of the things that happened during this pandemic happened very quickly. And I believe everybody that was participating in this thought that they were doing the best thing. So there's going to be some lessons, hopefully, that we will have learned from this, that we're going to do better the next time. And let's be real, it appears that we might be right in line for another pandemic around 2030. So everything that we learn here, hopefully we can implement it and not be these shock jocks, everybody attacking each other, that we start understanding that even in a pandemic, it's okay to have an opinion. Okay, there's that. Let's get started with probably like the first thing that really kicked me off down this rabbit hole. I'm really happy that I finally got to this episode because I really want to stop looking at the science. It's it has literally upset me so much that I'm finding that I'm waking up, around 1:30 in the middle of the night from a nightmare. Hopefully you, me, and the rest of the world can figure out how to come together to help make this better. When I got back into clinic at the beginning of April, it turned out that there was a lot of things happening. It wasn't just me, it wasn't just my husband that were feeling out of sorts. It was a lot of people in clinic that were feeling out of sorts. And what threw me off was I went back to a formula that I used with the alpha, beta, and delta variant of the COVID virus. And I couldn't figure out why I went back to those formulas. I can tell you with the Omicron variant, I was using some really simple formulas to clear that out. So that we were going back to this really serious formula, I couldn't understand that. So that was the first thing that had me going, something else is going on here. And then I can tell you the Pfizer documents were released. And then in February, there was a spike in average death rates globally. There was a 20% spike. So there was this huge increase in death rates. And to kind of put that in context, let's look at the deaths over the last 3 years. In the United States, the deaths over the last 3 years have been 34% or so higher than normal because of COVID. And so if we looked at a 5-year average, well, that 5-year average would have 3 years of already much higher death rates. And suddenly there was a spike in death rates above that. I don't know about you, but lately I've known about a lot of people who are dying who seem pretty healthy. So that had me concerned. It was a comment by Dr. Malone. He said something that really caught my attention. He said The spike protein is nasty, sometimes being referred to as a pathogenic protein, and is recognized as causing many of the awful pathologies associated with the disease of COVID-19. And then he goes on to state, I do not know how to write this more strongly. This technology is immature. The WHO has approved 6 more traditional vaccines, all of which the U.S. government could license. These genetic vaccines are not the only option. Okay, so that was in his health public policy nightmare. And these documents, I've set up a separate web page. You can go to that and look at those documents, because a lot of times this information disappears or it changes. And I don't think Dr. Malone would change his information. He's been pretty consistent about where he's standing. He's received a lot of kickback from what we would call the establishment. But here's the thing, what the heck, right? Here's smart people talking way over my head. I'm like, what the heck does he mean? The spike protein is referred to as a pathogenic protein. And what does he mean? I do not know how to write this more strongly. That's nice. That's pretty gentle. I mean, okay, can I have a cup of tea? You don't know how to write this more strongly. And seriously, I understand that's very, very serious terms, but for the average person, we don't understand what that means. So this technology, it's immature. Don't understand what that means. Okay, so let's talk about that spike protein. And I'm going to talk about that. We're going to go look at that Muddy Waters report, because again, like I said, that report really helped clarify what Dr. Malone meant in that comment. Wow. It sounds like we've got to learn a little bit more about the spike protein to understand that concept of pathogenic protein. So I'm going to turn to the Muddy Waters report. That was the Senate report that was released in April. It's an 18-month study on the origins of COVID-19. And if you go to page 27 to page 33, you can find all this information. So first off, the spike protein, it's not the full virus, right? It's just a piece of the virus that sits on the surface. And that piece allows the virus to connect to our cell membranes and infect them. Okay, so there are five, count them on one hand, there are 5 different pieces of this spike protein that's going to be important to us. And that's going to be called subunit 1, subunit 2, the Furin cleavage site, the Integrin receptor, and then there's an amino acid sequence. Subunit 1 allows the virus to connect to our cells. And then subunit 2 is like the locking mechanism. It's what seals the virus to our cell and allows the actual transfer of infection. And then we have the Furin cleavage site. Here's what is interesting. This coronavirus, it is part of a family of coronaviruses. COVID-19 is part of the family of Sarbeco coronaviruses, and to date, there is not another Sarbeco coronavirus that has a furin cleavage site, and they cannot find an animal reservoir in nature that could even be a possible precursor to this furin cleavage site. What's unique about this virus is, to date, there is not a natural made Sarbeco coronavirus that has this furin cleavage site. So that's why they said that's the smoking gun. That is why it is man-made and it isn't occurring naturally in nature. And that is why they haven't been able to find any animals yet that have that type of modification to the coronavirus. Okay, so I'm going to try and make this next part as understandable as possible. That Furin cleavage site, you're not finding it in nature. So that's their smoking gun. And it's in a really specific spot on this spike protein. It's right between subunit 1, subunit 2. And because of its location, it makes this thing more infective. If it had been located anyplace else on that spike protein, it would have reduced how easy this protein is at infecting people. One spot on the spike protein that it had to be in order to improve its ability to infect people. Anyplace else, it would have reduced its ability to infect people. Quite convenient, huh? And then right in front of that furin cleavage site is this amino acid sequence that I was talking about, this 5-protein amino acid sequence. And what they found is that for some reason, that amino acid sequence increases the virulence of this virus. And those two things together, that furin cleavage site and that amino acid sequence, they seem to aid each other in increasing the ability to infect people and increasing the ability of this virus to be more virulent or to be more dangerous. That brings us to the 5th piece of the spike protein, the integrin receptor. And I think this is the piece that actually keeps me up at night and that really bums me out, I guess, is what you can say. But what they found is integrin receptors, just to give you a general idea of what they do, they're involved in blood clotting. They're involved in inflammation. They're involved in cancers, and they're involved with infectious diseases. So when they marry with a virus, what they give to that virus, what they help it with is they increase its ability to infect you and me, and they increase how dangerous that virus is for you and me. This integrin was really important in increasing its acceptance into lung tissues, and so increasing the rapid transmission of this virus. And they also found that COVID-19, it has more bad effects on our heart than any other coronavirus, and it has more abnormal blood clotting issues than any other viral illness out there. So this clotting feature of this integrin, what it does is that's what's increasing the strokes. That's what's increasing the heart attacks, the lung and vein embolism. It's all about this integrin's ability to increase that functionality. There you have it. The 5 pieces of that spike protein, and why Dr. Malone says that the spike protein is nasty, because everything about it is about enhancing its ability to infect you and enhancing its ability to kill you. So now you know. I want to just take one more minute and talk about the smoking gun, because back at the beginning of this pandemic in January, February, and March, what we would call the establishment came out and told scientists that they could no longer say that this was a man-made virus. Well, I am looking at that Muddy Waters report, and what it says is the presence of a furin cleavage site is therefore highly unusual, leading to the smoking gun hypothesis of manipulation that has recently gained considerable attention as a possible origin of COVID-19. The intent to insert a furin cleavage site highlights the additional risk of experimenting with these viruses that have been enhanced for infectivity. So a couple things in that statement. This virus has this enhanced ability to infect you and me. And within that spike protein is a number of things that are, kind of unique. The probability of those all coming together or happening in this family of virus, that probability is not super high. And then that Furin cleavage site, we can't find this in nature. And so without being able to find it in nature, it would seem to suggest that this was man-made. And then you have the establishment telling all these scientists to retract their scientific research at the beginning of 2020 and saying that they didn't have any proof that this was man-made except for maybe science. I don't think you can have it both ways. I don't think you can say it's science when it supports what you want it to say, and that, oh, well, we haven't tested everything in the whole world yet, so we can't say that it was man-made. I think we can say that it's man-made 90% of the time, according to the end of this report, according to the summary of the Muddy Waters report, probably about 90% good at saying that this was man-made, and maybe somewhere down the line it will show that it wasn't man-made. So let's take that with a grain of salt, because then I was reading Dr. Mercola's report on this, and one of the things that he says is, since COVID-19 first entered the scene, exchange of ideas has basically been outlawed. That's very true, right? By sharing my views and those from various experts throughout the pandemic on COVID treatments and the experimental COVID jabs, I became a main target of the White House, the political establishment, and the global cabal. Okay, very, very true. Now we know for sure that these jabs, they're probably experimental, and that they definitely appear to be man-made, much more man-made than not. And Dr. Mercola, he took a lot of heat for saying things like that. And, I think what made this really tough is this whole pandemic thing got so supercharged, and people got so angry because no one can talk anymore. Everybody just has to sit across the table and yell at each other. And that, that kind of closes our ears off to what we can hear. So I can tell you, when Dr. Mercola uses words like the global cabal, I kind of hesitate and back off of that. I think that I'm listening to somebody who's been watching that Tom Hanks movie, Angels and Demons, where he's in the Vatican and all sorts of weird things are happening there. There's a whole group of people right now that is trying to be reasonable and is trying to find some middle ground and realizes that something went really wrong here, and we have to figure out how we come back to some sort of normal. And so then how can we help each other come to the table is, I guess, what we're saying. And I know there's a lot of brilliant people out there, and then obviously all these people are more brilliant than me, that I hope that they can help us find our way there. And I hope that they stop doing things to tear us apart. But I can tell you, I'm going to do an episode on what happens when you use the V word for vaccines. And, that is going to be a big discussion going over the next 2 years. And if we're going to go into another pandemic, which we probably will towards the end of this decade, we've got to really think through what happened here so that we do it better the next time. Okay, until next time, I'll catch you on the other side.